All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the March meeting of the Juvenile Detention Board of Managers of Delaware County. As always, we'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone could rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As with every other meeting, we will have 2 rounds of public comment. The first round of public comment is reserved for items that are specifically on the agenda for today. If there is anyone who is there that would like to speak, we ask that you keep your comments to no more than 5 minutes, and please give your name and your address at the outset. And also, please keep your mask on as you're speaking per the policy of the county. Is there anyone who'd like to speak? I see no one coming to the mic. All right. Next item for today is an approval of the minutes of last month's meeting. Is there a motion to approve the February meeting minutes?
So moved. Second.
Motion is second. Any questions or comments on the minutes before we vote? No. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item is a report on the youth report from Juvenile Court and Probation Services.
Good afternoon, everybody. Kirsten Fitzsimmons from Probation. We currently have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 7 youth who are currently detained. 4 are direct files, and the other 3 are juveniles. We have 2 males and 1 female. 1 at Bucks County, 1 at Chester County, 1 at Abraxas South Mountain. We have 2 at Abraxas Morgantown and 1 at Montgomery County Youth Center. Does anybody have any questions for probation at this time? All right, thank you.
I failed to mention at the outset, we did have an executive session last week to cover matters of public safety and contractual matters. Next item for today is the report from our Superintendent of Juvenile Justice Services, Mr. David Irizarry. David? And I also want to mention we have Marie Williams, our vice chair, and it looks like Shakima Fulmore-Townsend also joined us. So I think we have everyone from the board with us today.
All right, good afternoon, board. Again, I'm David Irizarry. I want to start with the first half of my report being somewhat of a report out of what our secure detention space, the license of it is. And I'm going to defer to our board solicitor, Mr. Carlton Johnson.
Good evening, Carlton Johnson, board solicitor. I will be very brief. The facility closed in March, and the facility's license expired in August of 2021. At the time the facility was closed, all the staff was departed from the facility, so there was no way to keep the facility back up and running and operating. The license has expired, so therefore the county has to go through a reapplication process to get a new license. That process under ordinary circumstances would take 6 to 9 months. Given that the closure was not under ordinary circumstances, it is likely that that process would take more than the ordinary 6 to 9 months, probably a year or so, in order to open a secure facility again. Any questions? And I'm sorry.
Can I just ask?
I wanted to add one point to that. And in the interim, we are negotiations with our county partners to secure beds.
So when we go to get a license renewed, we're not going to have an open facility then either. I mean, we're not going to run an empty facility. So how does that work?
In order to get the license, we have to have all the infrastructure for the facility in order to get the license.
So for a year, we have to fully staff a detention center.
We have to ramp up to staff the facility. We would not have a vacant facility that's fully staffed. We would be ramping up in terms of the application process.
So basically, we get a plan together. We open our facility with skeletal staff, I would say, right, to begin with, or?
We'd open the facility with whatever staffing requirements are to meet the administrative
Okay.
requirements of the state. There are specific requirements.
I'm sorry, just for audiovisual, the mic is very quiet on our solicitor.
Can you hear me better, Kevin?
That's much better. Yep.
Sorry.
And then I guess just as a follow-up to that, so then, say we get approval, what is the lead time? Is it like, once you get approval, is it then you're fully functioning in 30 days, or do you know what the statute says?
I am not in a position to offer a response on behalf of the Commonwealth because it will be within their purview of.
Oh, it varies, it's not like set out
It's not, under these circumstances, again, I recognize the circumstances and to give folks an idea, there's a similar circumstance in Glen Mills, and they're still in the process of trying to get their license. Okay?
I think from my point of view, at some point, and I wouldn't expect you to know today, but we should know what the steps are. So is it, do you need the staffing, do you need the facility, do you need the number of beds? There's got to be some form of checklist or, the steps you go through, just like we've done the health department. There's got to be some way that we can get something licensed, so, but we'll need to know what it is.
Right, and maybe, if we can start without having a fully fleshed out plan, let's start. Get in line and see if we can maybe perfect what we're doing as we go along. I mean, a year is a long time to be.
Just so the board knows,
Yeah.
there are things being done in the background to move that process along.
Oh, good.
Okay, so we have the application, we know, we're not going to discuss it in any detail tonight, but what the application process and what that looks like, there are some complicating factors, right? Because of the way the facility was closed that will impact possibly the Commonwealth's determination on what kind of process and how long that will take because it's a little outside of the norm.
And what if the Attorney General comes back and says they're not filing any charges with anybody in the facility?
From a professional and personal view, that would be a great thing.
I understand, but then does that make the application process easier for us to open back up?
It might, but again, there are some complicating factors.
Sorry, it's Carlton, may I jump in?
You may.
I'm not sure that well, it certainly would be a positive thing if there were no charges brought. There's always there's a civil and criminal, component to the proceedings against the county. And so with respect to what happened at the detention center. So I'm not sure that the disposition of criminal charges would necessarily be dispositive of the length of time it would take to restore the license.
Again, there are factors beyond our control, and as Shelley Smith just mentioned, there are criminal proceedings and there are civil proceedings.
Excuse me, sir, who's
Yes,
the
sir.
licensing body?
The Commonwealth.
But is it like PCCD? Is it the Attorney General? Is it
It's not
The
PCC.
Department of Public Welfare.
Yeah,
Department of Public Welfare? Okay.
Any other questions?
I just want to make the request that I really do want to know what it is we have to do. So if we could, I don't necessarily think we need a subcommittee per se, but if we need to be in an executive session at some point, if that's what's called for and we're properly within the sunshine law, I don't know, but I think we need to know what are the steps, just like if we would undertake any licensing of some function. So I just put that out there that I do request that we find that out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carlton. And, I would like to take time for the second half of my report to respectfully ask the board to approve a few steps that I'm hoping to take here in the county. I had the opportunity to gracefully report out to you all on what my first year plan would be in terms of a strategy. There are 3 key components that I need in initial. I'm hoping that you all can review and approve moving forward. The first piece I'm hoping to approve is the hiring of 3 staff members. That is a deputy director, a community development supervisor, and a senior administrative specialist. Key functions for the deputy director, under the procurement process, service provider contracts, grants, budget, human resources, and a lot of administrative support, I feel is a key in order moving forward. A lot of these titles have been changed since my presentation to go on the record, where we match with some existing positions. Formerly was listed as the Director of Field Operations, is now listed as Community Development Supervisor. A big part of their role is, community-based organization, coalition building, assessment, evaluation of current programs, quality assurance of young people who are currently in facilities, making sure that they have a rep to talk to, and as well as identifying resources in the community that we can utilize in our strategy moving forward. Then you have your senior administrative position, essentially, an executive assistant to our leadership team, if you all approve. A lot of the key administrative support that's needed. Jim Coyne, who's no longer here, did a lot for this board, assuming a lot of that role. Just hoping all that you all can approve moving forward with posting those positions need be. So I think I'll kind of present out what each ask is, and at that point, hopefully you all can give me a yay or nay in terms of moving forward. Any objections to hiring new staff here?
No objections. I do have a question.
Sure.
And maybe this is for Carlton and Shelley. Would those folks, whoever you identify and then hire, are they part of the process of this, or the steps to licensing, whatever they may be? Would they be involved in that, or?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to be 2 feet and 2 hands in with the licensing aspect of it. There's other components. This deputy director, having a lot of the key administrative tasks, will be assisting me with that. We'll be working toward it every day.
Would any of the furloughed employees or the former employees that worked at the juvenile detention be eligible for those positions? And would they be given any special preference since they are already employees of the county?
Well, I think anybody who's interested should apply. In terms of special preferences, I want to be fair. I want it to be a fair process. But I also understand a lot of folks, their current situations and positions, and I'm willing to hear them out on that for sure.
My understanding, Chris, the last time I brought this question up when you weren't present, was that I understood for those employees, they have been contacted. And that's what I've been told, that they've been informed that there are positions and there's
Correct.
a process.
Correct.
And they'll be posted.
Right.
And be considered as long as there's no conflict with the AG's office.
I just a couple comments.
Sure.
I think if the people were coming on board to pursue the licensing, that would be number one, and I can see a deputy, and I can also see an admin person, but I will
Sure.
tell you that very few people in this building have a senior executive assistant, just to put it bluntly.
Sure.
In fact, today, I think the executive director may have just been able to elevate a person to that with a lot of responsibility. So I see this as, yes, maybe down the line you're gonna need more, but at this point, we don't have a facility open and there's no one to supervise. I think you do need admin help,
Sure.
but I don't know. And I also want to just put out there that I think we could make a recommendation, but this would go I think some of these jobs may need to be created and we go to council in their capacity as council or personnel board. So, I'm a little bit, I'm just a little bit concerned that we might need these down the line, but I think you need some of it, but I don't know if we need it all now.
Understood.
I think there was one piece I just wanted you to comment on. I think he worked with our personnel department to find positions that were already created and graded.
Yes.
To choose, but I'm not saying it for the senior administrative specialist, but I think that these positions were, the salary and the grade are set within the system already.
Correct.
We worked with, Mr. Johnson to
That's
figure out
correct.
which ones were already set for the
Okay.
That is correct. Vice Chair Williams has
And I also want to point out that posting these jobs today, we may not find someone for 6 months. I mean, that's just the way the market is right now. Because we've seen that in all of our senior, it takes a long time to find the right person for senior level management. So and I don't doubt that you would need someone at a high level to create this entire department. I think this is appropriate.
Right, and it is a shared position in terms of the administrative specialist. It's a shared position amongst the deputy director and as well as this community person as well. So
No, I
it isn't
know
just
that.
assigned to me.
That goes without saying around
Sure.
here, to be honest.
Right.
Council has one person and people, my assistant does 4 different jobs. So I'm not saying that you don't need admin help. I'm just not sure that's the right level, to be honest, but that's my view.
Understood.
Ms. Williams, did you have a comment?
Mr. Madden, you're muted.
I am not muted.
We still can't hear you.
Well,
Can you all hear me?
I can now. I had lost sound for a little while.
While we're getting that adjusted, did you?
And folks in the
look at different
room?
Grades and the different levels for, just to go to Ms. Phelps' point, for the administrative positions and the different variations of those.
Sure.
Did you consider maybe the executive assistant level or just the variety of options within our grading system? And just if you wanted to go back and
Yeah, I think
relook at it
Jamal and
just
I,
to see what it looks like
yeah, we
for
work
now.
closely. We can go back for sure. And we can revisit if folks want to grade a little bit lower, we can consider that as well.
Just something to consider, I'm just.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I guess the other question I would ask along those same lines would be, given, are these people important to your strategic planning for moving the whole process forward as it relates to how you're going to build out both the facility, the staff, the visioning and things like that? So is this one of those beginning steps, or is it roles within the department once you have done the visioning?
Sure, it's a combination. So I just for context, right? I'm a one-man department. So I think collectively we're deciding if a facility is going to be built, right? And I think all these positions really buy into that if we need it. But in terms of the strategy, being proactive and really involved in the community, and the data-driven decision making, all considered for sure. So I consider any route we take in terms of these essential staff. And again, I think as we grow, there's going to be more staff needed. But in initial phases, I really believe these are key positions needed. In terms of their function, in terms of the grade and the pay, folks want us to revisit that. That can be revisited as well. But I'm just a fan of, the better you pay folks, the better job they'll do for you. And I really need some folks aboard that are happy and willing to help.
so again, just to get a little hearing in the room, can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Is there a thought to then prioritizing 1 or 2 of these positions first? Again, while we don't have a facility locally, but understanding that you can't be a one-man department.
Yeah, I'm more than willing to, whether one person or 3, any help I can get, I do appreciate that. If I had to prioritize a position, would be my number 2 in the deputy director.
It was just basically a question to the chair whether or not a motion was required to approve this. I mean, I'm not inclined to second guess what is necessary to both investigate how the facility might be reopened, whether there needs to be the same kind of facility, negotiating contracts with other counties, negotiating levels of compensation for those counties. That seems to me to be a job that could be handled by far more people than are being requested today. So I don't know if the chair wants to entertain a motion to approve this, details pending, or whether further discussion is required.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd certainly entertain a motion if a member of the board would like to make one.
Just another point of further discussion on this, and I don't know where we're going necessarily. If we get on the agenda that we have an agreement with a county and they said, you know, you need to staff up 15 people, then some of these, like, these are going to be needed, at least the deputy director admin, because you're going to be in a hiring mode. Sure. I don't know if we're there yet. I also agree with Councilwoman Schaefer that it takes a while to get people, so I'm not against that, but I would have to say that until, as we go along and create the plan, that, you know, that's going to dictate what we need, so a little bit more. So I just put that out there. If you tell me that we're going to be able to piggyback on a county and we got to staff up, well then, yeah, let's get going on this. If it's, you know, on the community development side, I don't know. To me, if we were prioritizing, it would be a deputy and, right, and an admin person at this point. But that's just my take on it.
Well, I wonder though, if we're going to be staffing up to support the counties with which we have contracts, I assume there's going to be training, onboarding, policy development. They're not going to be, you know, I hope we're not hiring people completely green and expecting, you know, Mr. Irizarry to train them all himself, schedule the training, to find providers to schedule the training, to bring them to the, I mean, I feel like, you know, he has more than established that these staff positions are necessary, but I'll defer to others on the level and the compensation.
And I will also say one function that you know, in terms of this community person I want to hire is the quality assurance piece. We currently do have young people who are placed outside our county, and one function of the position is the quality assurance piece, right? Checking up on them, making sure that, you know, their needs are met, and, you know, they're safe.
Yeah,
I would love to do it myself, but, you know, there's a lot going on.
Right.
No,
and I would say for me that community building is the one that could actually start full-time right now and be fully engaged. Because even if we don't have our own detention center at this point, building those coalitions and setting up the network that's going to support these kids, that's going to take a year too. So I think I think they're all important. So.
I agree, and I think, I mean, we just heard a year and we thought that was a long time, but it's really not. If we're trying to move, and it sounds like you are, you need support, you need skilled professionals. I think the salaries are appropriate for the quality that we want, and you need support. And so we can't ask Dave or the board to move forward on steps without a team. And I would agree that I think they're all appropriate.
I think also we're moving in multiple directions at the same time. And I just want to echo Candace's point. There are multiple stages to these plans, and you do need a level of staff that can manage the different approaches, because we have a lot of things at play that I know we will want to move with speed. We have a pretty clear goal in mind, but how we get there is really going to be up to Mr. Irizarry to really direct his team. And if he doesn't have people, we're just moving slower than any of us want. So I would just echo the support.
So is there a motion to recommend the creation of these three positions and the hiring?
I'll motion to alter.
Second.
Thank you, board. The second item.
We have to vote.
I'm sorry.
So with the motion a second, is there any further discussion or questions or comments before we vote on the recommendation?
I'm just going to say I'm going to vote no because I just think it's premature for all these. So I just want you to know why. It's not that I'm against it, but I think at this point we should be focused on the detention part, and that's where I'm coming from.
And Justin, I would like the director to give a lot of thought into who you're going to hire.
Sure.
Meaning, if you can look back at the past employees at the detention center, I think they deserve to have a.
You have my word, I will.
Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
And any opposed?
Nay.
All right, the ayes have it.
Thank you, Board. The second item that I want to present to you all is being able to move forward with potential pilot partnership with YAP. They've been to the table. I've met with their CEO, Jeff Flesher. Last communication was on 2/28, really developing one of our first alternatives to detention here. I think the program is evidence-based. I provided you all with some literature just in terms of what they're hoping to provide. Ultimately, going to be able to serve 60 young people a year with 15 at a time and 3 months at a time. I think it's something that is key moving forward as we invest in what the long term here is in terms of detention. Having some alternatives, I think, puts us in a good place as well. Again, there's the price tag associated with it. They are bringing, I think, $500,000 to the table, and at that point, it'd be a pilot program. And with the notion that we would be able to accept the price tag moving forward if this is something that's effective. So we'll monitor the outcomes. If it gets us what we want, we can bring it to the table and say, next calendar year, we want to continue to invest in this.
Is this something that gets offered to the courts as an alternative that's available? I'm just wondering how it works.
Right, so I think anything we produce as a group is going to be presented to the court. The next steps is what the CO is asking is actually our criminal justice stakeholders have a meeting, develop what the program looks like. So not only probation, but as well as the district attorney's office, and folks will be well aware of what we're producing here, and essentially just put something else on the menu that gives his or her honor the opportunity to utilize.
Have you discussed this with the director of juvenile probation, Director DiMatteo?
In terms of moving forward, I have not. Again, I brought it to you all, and the next steps would be having all our criminal justice partners at the table, including Ms. DiMatteo, and developing what it looks like and what it could look like here for Delaware County. So there isn't a program that exists. I'm asking to move forward with the model.
I would agree, as long as I think she should be involved in this initial discussion.
Sure.
Because obviously, if this is not successful, it may have an impact on detention, or if it is successful, a very positive impact. We see a lot fewer in detention. I'm sure she would not be opposed to that.
Understood.
Okay.
We did have a presentation here, but I'm forgetting some aspects of it. I do remember something, and maybe Danielle can speak to this, that juvenile probation might have had some experience or have experience with YAP, and if not, do we have other counties that have that we could get some feedback? I mean, this is a lot of money.
Sure.
It sounds like a great program. I think we all agreed when we heard the presentation, but I am curious about the thoughts of the team at juvenile probation and parole.
Sure.
If I could just jump in, I think data was presented when YAP first presented to us. We can share that with the board again. They had data from Philadelphia County, from Cook County, Illinois, from a couple other jurisdictions. And just one other comment I'd like to make is to just alert the board to the fact that alternatives to detention is not incorrect, but it's incomplete when it describes what YAP does. I think folks know that the vast majority of young people who are involved with the juvenile justice system are not in detention, but are still in need of some supervision, and that most juvenile probation departments, including the one that we have in Delaware County, are often not equipped to provide the level of intensive supervision that the young people who are not detained and who may never have been placed might need. So I just want folks not to be sort of distracted by the phrase alternatives to detention. It doesn't mean that there are no young people who will be detained ever again if there's a YAP. It just means that there's an additional tool in the toolbox, as David described.
I would agree with that with the following comment, and that is that there's not enough money put in from the county level for these kind of alternatives. And so the question is, do we want to ask the taxpayers to put more money into more of these alternatives? And that's a tough question to ask, I think. But I think I agree with you totally, but you've got to put more money in it to have the success. I still would like to hear from juvenile detention. I'm sorry, juvenile probation. On that point, yes, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody, again. So I have also met with the CEO, Jeff Fleischer, multiple times about YAP. We have also, we had a meeting with them in December to discuss them coming to the table, and we are at the point now that we are actively preparing a design meeting involving all of our stakeholders. There is an email ready to go that would be coming to many of you, or at the very least, you, Mr. Irizarry, to, we need to get a schedule on board because they're representing that they would like anywhere between 4 or so hours to plan a design meeting with everybody who would be involved, including the DA, the public defenders, probation, the board, Mr. Irizarry, to really design what Delaware County is looking for. It is absolutely an alternative at this point. What they were asking for is more so an alternative to placement than it is an alternative to detention, given the length of stay that they would like the juveniles in their program, for their own outcome measures and for it to be worth it for their money to go worthwhile as well. I have actually visited YAP in Lebanon County, where they run an evening reporting center. Lebanon County is on a much smaller basis than it is in Delaware County, as you can imagine, but their evening reporting centers run very well. They have great staff. I imagine that if that is something we would be looking for, they probably wouldn't be so interested in doing that, but there are other providers who would be interested in, doing an evening reporting center here in Delaware County as well. YAP has made it very clear to probation that they are interested in doing an alternative, at least to my knowledge. But, we have been in contact with them. There is an email ready to go. We would like to clear out, about 4 hours, and they also said that they would provide food, so,
So if one of the things they're looking for is an alternative to placement, then that really goes to the courts.
Correct.
Are they prepared to go to whether the president judge or whoever the juvenile court judge is with that proposal?
I would believe so, but I'll let Director DiMatteo answer that, but I would believe so. They are ready.
Okay.
Yeah, at the point that we met with him in December, we had already discussed with the president judge, and with his agreement to move forward, that's when we met with him. We were planning the next steps was to advance the contract to council. They recommended that we come back and do this design phase. They also recommended that we try to do it for the 4 or 5 hours and that we do it in person so that there's some work groups and some other things that are a little easier to manage in person than they are to do the breakouts virtually. And we knew that we were close or hopeful to be close to coming together again. So the email's been drafted. The stakeholders have been identified, which, as Kirsten said, includes the board, includes the DA, the public defender, CYS, Human Services, OBH, law enforcement will extend it through the Criminal Justice Advisory Board as well, Mr. Irizarry. And anyone else that someone would suggest is certainly welcome. Similar to when we did the Juvenile Justice Roundtable, Judge, that you ran. So a group sort of that size is what we envision. And Kirsten's preparing the survey to solicit convenient dates for everyone given the length of time. Once that goes out and the dates are selected, then the meeting will be scheduled. And we're looking at space at DCIU, because we have a nice conference room available to us there with tables and work surfaces that are a little easier to manage. And since we're all vying for space here all the time, it seems like it's a good fit.
So just to be clear, though, then this doesn't help our detention problem. This is for placement of use.
Well, I think I try not to be specific in the sense that an alternative is an alternative. So they might serve as an alternative to detention in certain cases, but they are providing an evidence-based service. And so they do need 30, 60, 90 days. In most cases, where recommended practice would be that an alternative to detention would be 30 days or less, because the point is to either detain and come to court because there's a flight risk or a risk to the community, or to do the alternative and you feel that you can safely bring the child before the court in a reasonable amount of time, which in our case is generally within, 20 to 30 days.
Ms. Williams, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused and frankly, well, I'm confused. So we have a new director of juvenile detention, and I would have hoped that if there's a program that implicates detention, that he would be pulled into this conversation such that he would know that there's an email prepared to fly within hours. So, I mean, just as a member of this board, I would request that collaboration occur so that we're not hearing first from Mr. Irizarry proposing something, which I think he shared before this meeting, that he was going to put this on the agenda, and then to come to the meeting and hear that, oh, it's fully baked or almost. So I'm just going to request that there be a little bit more of a collaborative spirit in moving this ball down the road. Because we've been talking about YAP since I sat on this board in September or October.
And I agree, and there's probably some transition and discussions that probably need to occur or should be occurring. I think it's a matter of Dave and I have spoken about trying to find a way through some of this because I don't think it's clear to all of us. And as you said, YAP was on the table since September. Kirsten has been working that angle in terms of gathering state information from all the counties and looking at different programs, talking with the individuals, and we were at the stage come December that we thought we were going to advance it in the new year. We certainly wanted to have it on the table before the contract cycle, which is coming up for us, as you know, generally between March and May. Sandy Garrison appears jointly with us with all the contracts for the year. And I think it was really just a matter of coming out of the pandemic or, finding our way to be able to meet in person. I did not know it was on the agenda till I walked in, so I apologize. I don't recall seeing the agenda before, but I was tied up for the last day and a half in other things.
So to the board, I think for today, what we can consider here is to make a recommendation for the county to enter into an agreement with YAP. Ultimately, there's going to need to be a contract that goes before county council. But I think we can make that recommendation to move the ball forward. And as Ms. Williams said, the superintendent of, this department ought to be involved in helping that out.
Just a question for Mr. Mateo. As you're bringing this forward to council, I just want to understand the logistics. You're going to bring this forward as a contract, and then because they're technically donating their services, you're going to bring it forward as a grant too?
So it'll come forward, as I understood from our last discussion, is that it will come forward as a letter of agreement with the provider. They're going to fund the first year. As I said, in the earlier discussions at the end of the year, we had specifically targeted, we thought Upper Darby and the city of Chester as two particular populations that they thought they could staff. And then it would be a contract in the next year, in the next cycle, if that's successful.
But for my part, I think we would be realizing that it would be, quote unquote, free for the first year. Even so, it would be, engaging the county in a relationship that there would be some momentum to continue. So in that regard, I think either way it should be coming before council.
Yes, but I was just trying to figure out the mechanism was whether that was coming before us as like we're accepting a grant or some sort of agreement that they would be covering the cost for the first year.
Yeah, and then afterwards we would rely heavily on our needs-based allocation that juvenile probation gets from the state to be able to offset that at about an 80-20 ratio, because it would be 80% reimbursable as an in-home service for us when we move forward into the next year.
Can I just clarify something? Because what's confusing me is you seem to be down a path with the same organization that he's having a conversation with. And I just want to make sure, are we engaging them for the same service, same population, same duration? And are you bringing it before council for us to go into relationship for this pilot year, which they will cover? And were you, David, bringing it to us in terms of a contract that we potentially would turn into after the pilot phase is over? I'm trying to understand how we got here.
Yeah.
Because this is
it a joint effort?
Is it a joint effort? Because it sounds like it was already in the works. So
I think And I agree, and I think it would be. It has been in the works since it was brought to the table. I think it was either the district attorney or the board originally who brought it to Judge Kelly.
Yes.
Judge Kelly sent it to our department and asked us to review it as we do with all services, and we began that process. By December, we were pretty confident in what we were seeing, what they were sharing, and what the program would likely look like in terms of what they would have available in terms of monitors, staffing, community engagement specialist. They told us, how long they would need to bring things together, and I think that we were moving forward in that direction. I think in the conversations, and again, when this invitation went out, it would be an invitation for that design discussion, not necessarily at the point that we were making an agreement. And certainly with Mr. Rosari in his position, he would have been included in that process. Because it is a community program, we weren't, again, I just think that there's some uncertainty as to what programs are going to fall where, because it's not an in-facility or detention program. It's an in-home service program similar to the other in-home services that we run through human services and under.
That's actually incomplete. So the design phase of YAP involves things like determining whether or not there's a reentry component, which would directly implicate any detention center where Delco young people are housed. So I mean, it feels like maybe we're getting into the weeds a little bit. I can see that the chair wants to speak, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, I think just to move us forward here, I think regardless, there's going to have to be a contract that comes before council. We have on this board a majority of council. I think what we can at least do as a board here is to, regardless of how we kind of got to where we are, I think we can recommend that a contract be entered into with YAP by the county, and that our superintendent work collaboratively with the courts and with human services to flesh out a contract to come before council. Does that make sense to folks?
I would agree, and I would include juvenile probation as well.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Right. And I just want to reiterate too that when it comes, the administering departments are really critical, because that's how we get reimbursed for funding. So this board on its own, we would not be administering that. It would be coming through human services and juvenile probation, the way they
Historically,
come
yes.
for the reimbursement.
Generally, I believe in most counties, 2A or below, that's how it operates. I'm not familiar with counties classed higher than that, as familiar.
I do have one more question before I feel comfortable moving forward with the motion, which is YAP's offer of the pilot contingent on a contract coming the year after?
Yes, they are wholly confident that the outcomes that we'll realize would advance that contract in the new year.
Which is clear. I don't think there's a guarantee. I don't think there's a guarantee of county funding here. Right? My understanding is this is a pilot.
Right.
It is.
I understand that, but the question that I'm asking is if YAP is willing to fund the pilot with or without the promise of a contract. That's a very specific type of question.
Well, if it's with the promise of a contract, then it's not really a pilot. I mean, it's, my understanding.
It's not with the promise of a contract.
Okay, thank you.
No, but again, we consider sustainability when we enter into these opportunities, and we look at the ways in which we would fund it thereafter. Again, if they're as good as we've seen them in other counties, we're as hopeful here that.
I got the answer.
Yeah.
I'm good.
I'm supportive of the way Chairman Madden's saying that if we can recommend that we move forward, it'll be subject to council and solicitor's approval, and everybody will participate in crafting it. Sounds like it's been moved along, so I'm supportive of that. I don't know if you need a motion for us to.
If there is a motion, I'd appreciate that.
Second.
Your motion is second. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it.
So the last item that I'm hoping to bring before our board here is to be able to move forward with developing and bring before county council an RFP as it pertains to the strategy that I laid out last month. Again, really support steps 1 through 3, in which we want to do collective data collection process, collectively between all partners, developing what our research questions are, assessing what our current options are, and as well as using that information to really outline a data-driven approach in terms of what programs we want to invest in next calendar year. And then I think most importantly, how do we implement that here in the county? Again, this is part of the long-term strategy. Understanding the current need, that's kind of happening, corresponding with these 3 steps, investing with the long-term approach is. But again, bringing some of these national providers to the table to really help us direct what the future looks like here in Delaware County, I think it's important. So, I think if anybody on the board, I know I presented last week, if you had any specific questions around the steps, around what this process looks like. Again, I have a lot of examples on how different states and cities have used these technical TTA providers. I can, send that to you all for review as well.
Do you have a sense of proposed cost of this kind of contract, David?
Right. So again, it's a process that takes anywhere from 9 months to a year to complete, and that price usually ranges anywhere between $100,000 to $250,000. It's a one-time expense. I'm sorry.
Do you have anyone in the county that can help you with this, doing this whole proposal process, or is it just you doing it?
Yeah, we can hire researchers. We can subcontract researchers as well as data folks. Again, we would have to compare and contrast what that looks like, as opposed to these national organizations that do it, that have done it, that have the experience.
No, I meant just the RFP, putting the RFP together.
Oh yeah, I can write it myself. Present that to count. I have experience doing that myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And David, when you get responses to the RFP as proposals come in, is it, and maybe you've not thought this far down the road, but is it your plan to bring those proposals to the board, or can you give us a sense of what your process would look like?
Yeah, I'll be leaning heavily on the boards to pretty much accept in terms of what agency we want to partner with. It all depends on how you want to go. If you want, my top 5 picks, if you want everybody who applies, we can do that as well. And happy to collaborate in terms of that.
So my understanding is what you're asking of the board is to support the idea of creating an RFP for this service, and that RFP would ultimately be approved by the board.
Correct.
Any other questions or comments from the board on this?
If I just heard you right, Kevin, that you're saying if we would be approving to go forward with drafting one, and then we would then see it and then move it forward to council? Because I also remember speaking that there was a phase 4, which was the facility, and I'm just wondering how everything fits in together. If we're looking at licensing, I don't want to be diverted. If we should be looking most closely at licensing right now, or what the steps are, you only have so much bandwidth. So,
sure.
But if it's to draft something to then, I think maybe in a month we'll know more of where we're going.
I think that speaks to the need for additional staff for David, quite honestly. That way, the more help he has, the more of a brain trust in form of a deputy and others, then he can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Well, I agree that everybody can use more staff, but I can also say that I know that there's been efforts for contracting with other counties, and I don't know where we stand on all of that. I know it's been a heavy lift for people, and I would like that to be the primary lift right now. And that's just my priority, and I only have 1 vote, so that's my priority. So.
Yeah, I think, crafting an RFP should not in any way take away from the urgency of what we're doing with regard to counties.
And for the record, in a 24-hour day, if it's a debate between writing an RFP and editing an RFP, or having a conversation with a county who's going to give us some secure temporary space, that takes priority. And in terms of that fourth step, obviously, that really focused on the long term, right? We knew that, I knew coming in there was going to be a period of time in which we would have, we would be able to focus on the license and making sure, but that's something that's going to be happening continuously throughout. And once a provider comes on in terms of RFP, they're doing all the heavy lifting, right? We're just kind of guiding it, and at that point, we can present out, we can build in the contract, quarterly, they present out where they are, what information they're finding. Again, in my experience, partnering with these type of agencies, it's just a weekly call. They're giving us an update. They're doing all the heavy lifting, but they're the experts. And I think at some point having a third party come in, aside from myself and give the and help us prepare recommendations, and they've done it in other jurisdictions. We're talking long term. We're talking a long game, and it can be a game changer here.
We also have a central purchasing department. I'm wondering whether Mr. Lazarus might be speaking to some help that could be given to.
Thanks, Madam Controller. It's great lead in. So what we're going to look for to David to do is to develop the technical scope of what he wants. Mm-hmm. It's really, when you talk about an RFP, you're going to put out what are the outcomes you want to achieve. The reason you go into a proposal process is you go out and seek the expertise of providers in the area to tell you and to work with you on the best way to get there. Going through that process, David would prepare the technical scope, bring it back to you to discuss it, make sure we can probably describe what it is we want to do, and then we'll put it together. We'll bring an item to council to authorize going out for the proposal after you agree to the scope. Then, part of the review process, we'll get stakeholders involved to help review what comes in to make sure that the proposal clearly reflects the values we're trying to achieve, go through an evaluation process, and then we'll bring it back. It doesn't have to take an extended amount of time, but we do need to be diligent in what we do. There are people who'll be able to help identify stakeholders. We're about to engage the county's first diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. That person will be able to help make sure that we get a wide and representative portion of the county involved as well. And then at that time, if you put on a calendar, David's going to be involved in his budget for next year. So I have to figure out what exactly it is that he'll bring back to you to talk through the budget on. While that's going on, the issue that Ms. Phillips also brought up about getting a license is something that's going to be complicated. It's going to go through a legal process where not everything can be made public because of some of the, as Mr. Johnson talked about before, there are some other ramifications. You do have the opportunity to go into closed session to discuss that as well. The action you just took to provide some staff, we can work with David through personnel to make sure that we use an existing position that's already scored and graded in the county's personnel process so that we can go ahead and hire as long as it's budgeted and it's within that scale. So there's a lot of structure there. There's a lot of things we can do to help as well. The biggest challenge right now is finding an office for him and the staff. So we're going to figure out where to do that. But I think it's a good process and a good path forward, and it'll be inclusive and helpful. And as David gets his feet on the ground with the county structure, he'll be able to really start running as opposed to crawling right now.
Questions?
Yes,
Sure.
just a quick question on the RFP or your plans for the RFP. I remember when you presented last month, you had discussed that there were two key elements to it, and that you were considering looking for groups that would be able to do either element or a group that could do both. Are you still going to not split the RFP, but offer agencies that can do either or, and to see which comes in as the best possible
I think we can word it in which if you're a provider that your expertise is stage one and not necessarily stage two, you have an opportunity to just apply for stage one. My preference would be an agency that has experience doing all three, but again, whatever works for here in the county works for the team, and obviously everything will be presented to you all to decide on and vote on as a group, we'll move forward with. There are agencies that I've met with that have experience working all three, and there's some that said, hey, maybe stage two is where we come in, and I let them know that there may be an opportunity just to apply for that as well. Right.
So is there a motion from the board to direct our superintendent to draft an with the support of the county for
So
a national training and technical assistance provider for strategy.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further questions or comments before we vote? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? You guys have it.
Thank you, Board. Appreciate your time.
The next item on our agenda is status for juvenile detention space. Again, in light of the fact that we have ongoing negotiations on the matter, and we've had an executive session giving the board an update, perhaps there can just be a very general update on what we're doing there. And I'm frankly happy to give that update, which is essentially that we are in ongoing discussions with a few of our neighboring counties with regard to finding immediate assistance with regard to detention. And I will leave it at that for today. All right, any new business for today from the board? Hearing none, we are at the second round of public comments. Is there anyone from the public who would address the board? And again, I'd ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes. Your name and address at the outset.
Good afternoon, everybody. Alyssa Poole, I'm from the Public Defender's Office. I wanted to take just a few minutes to first encourage that we do move forward with the app. They had originally first reached out to my office last June. I know that they have presented twice to the board, and I do think they really do offer some great alternatives. I know a lot of the time when we have these meetings, we're focused on just the detention numbers. And the lack of us not having a facility and having to partner with other counties, how we can't put as many kids in detention as probation and the DA's office initially wants to. What I wanted to bring to the board's attention is that right now, Delaware County only has 14 kids in placement, right? So placement is after the case goes through, there's a resolution, we determine what the needs are. There are only 14. 9 of them are public defender clients. So while I appreciate that it's scary to see kids accused of certain offenses and then us being told we can't put them in detention, overall, we've had a lot of success with these kids being in the community and then not needing to go to placement. So I really do think more funds being allocated to community support for these kids, for these families, is really something that should be of importance to this board moving forward. I know that everybody wants a space, and I'm not arguing that there are kids that need to be detained, because there are, but I think overwhelmingly it's a very small number of the population, and that the community support is really where we need to be. Right now, there's only 3 kids in total in detention for Delaware County. When the detention center was closed down last March, there was only 5. So the numbers really are not all that different from when we did have the facility to where we are today. So that's all I just wanted to add tonight. Thanks.
Colleen Kennedy. Do I have to give my address, or what is the rule here?
Yes.
Okay, Colleen Kennedy, 8723 Westchester Pike in Upper Darby. So I have a couple of questions, but I have a habit of coming to meetings and then it sounds like I'm just complaining about everything. So I first off just want to thank you all for talking about the app program. I think it's awesome, and I hope that more discussions will come from that. So I have a few questions, and I don't go to all of these meetings, so maybe it's things that I've missed, work that you all are doing. So I don't want it to be taken as an act of disrespect that I'm asking these questions. So first off, I was wondering what the status is of any investigation or evaluation activity by AG Shapiro's office into the abuse of children who have been detained across the Commonwealth. And if the status is incomplete, how will you adequately include any recommendations in your plans as you look to reopen this facility? How will you hire in a way that ensures that applicants meet prior proper qualifications? That's my first question. I don't know if you want me to read them and then you answer, or.
Yeah, this is really for public comment. It's not, kind of a interrogation of the board. But what I would say is any members of the board in board member comment can certainly address your questions if they like to.
Sure. And I by no means am I trying to interrogate anybody. I just think that they're important issues. So the second question that I have is, how have you brought the voices of survivors of abuse in these facilities to the table as you continue these discussions? My next question is, what ongoing oversight does this board have over the day-to-day operation of a future juvenile detention center? My next question is, what safety parameters have been developed to prevent any further abuse from happening? And going back to my first question, it sounds like there's still some work to be done to figure out what the root causes of that abuse were. And then finally, what are we actively doing? And I think this speaks back to the YAP program, but what other things are we actively doing to reduce the number of young people being caged? Are we looking at the way we invest public funds for services and support to kids and families to lower these rates? So I just wanted to get those concerns on record. I think that we're at a huge and pivotal moment where we can be thinking about whether we need a juvenile detention center moving forward, or whether we need to be making even bigger investments toward having young people not go to these facilities. Thank you.
And I would just like to say, this is David Rosari. I would like to find some time to meet. We can discuss a lot of your questions and concerns one-on-one. And I definitely want to hear you out. And I think your perspective is important.
Sure. I'm sorry that I didn't realize it was you talking because of the mask. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think I just want to add that the board made a priority to hire a superintendent, which we have, put our faith and our trust in David's skill set to address a lot of the issues that you just brought up.
Sure.
Moving forward, to create a different space for the daily operations that would be under the responsibility of David and his team. I think you heard tonight that we were committed and a motion was approved to move forward so David can have a support team to assist in a lot of what your concerns are, including what I heard was quality assurance moving forward. And regarding the AG's office, we're all on the same page that we do not have information, we're not privy to that information, and so we're in the same position as you are. Our position here as members of the board is to move forward to create a space, I think that we're all in agreement, that meets the needs of the community, safety for the juveniles and safety for the community as a whole.
Okay. My last quick comment is just that there is also a juvenile task force with the governor's office, so there is a public report of recommendations. I'm sure you all have read it ad nauseum and have talked about it. But a key finding of it was figuring out how to evaluate data as to the root causes of abuse. And so I would just really urge folks to continue to check in with AG Shapiro's office so that we can figure out what those root causes are and prevent that from ever happening again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public for today? Hearing and seeing none. Any further comments from board members?
Yes, I had some comments prepared, but after hearing everybody in this meeting, I've drawn a line through all of it because this board is really on all cylinders, so to speak, in terms of asking questions, being insightful, and I want to give credit to the board members who are volunteering their time, also to Director DiMatteo, who has done a fabulous amount of work even before we had this board with juvenile probation, and to our new executive director too. Thank you.
I just want to make one comment just in response to the questions, which are good questions, but I don't think that the AG hasn't taken action. There's been no indictment. I don't think we can put it that there's what has happened. We don't know. And we can't assume that there will be, there may not be. So I don't think we can, impugn the people that were there necessarily until something comes out.
And I'd just like to add a comment related to the data. I think one of the things that's been encouraging, especially with Mr. Irizarry's presentation last meeting, was the use of data in his intentional efforts to collect community voice and also to involve young people. We spent quite some time talking about that at the last meeting, and so I do think that I am encouraged by the direction of the superintendent. I think that we're really taking this data process seriously and making decisions that are data-driven, and he's demonstrated that in every aspect of his plan.
Yeah, and for my part, I think just to take a step back and somewhat to piggyback off of Judge Nichols' comments, this board inherited an incredibly challenging situation, right? We did not have any oversight of the prior facility, but what we inherited was a vacuum, and one in which, as we heard from the solicitor, there is no near-term fix for reinstating a license locally. So what I think we've heard is that we are pushing with urgency to find near-term solutions to the challenges of placing a juvenile without it, while Mr. Rizzeri moves forth with a longer-term fix that meets the values of this board. That's all I have for today. I don't know if there are any other comments before we entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
David, haven't had this